Hi, I'm Robert Berencher. I'm talking with Dr. Brian DeVries about end-of-life conversations and LGBT aging. I was just wondering, what is the current state of LGBT aging and what is meant by going back into the closet?
I think LGBT aging as a field has experienced a renaissance, certainly, and it's experiencing significant growth. You know, it's interesting, in the 80s there were several studies on LGBT aging. Doug Kimmel, Marcy Edelman, for example, and it seemed as if that could have been the start of this new literature. Interestingly, sadly, I think AIDS curtailed that almost all of the effort in understanding the experiences of LGBT people went in some very reasonable ways to understand what it was like to be dying at an early age. So much so that I think age and LGBT experiences were seen as mutually exclusive. Some of the successes of antiviral therapies, for example, has allowed large numbers of those HIV positive to now reach later life, and the estimate is that about half of those who are HIV positive are at least 50 years of age. The median age, in fact, of those who are HIV positive is 50 now in many locations across the country, should be nationally in a couple years. And so that's part of the real shift, and I think it's allowed an opportunity for us to think more broadly of the experiences of aging of LGBT people under stigmatizing conditions, under experiences of discrimination, that I think offers a window into how we might better understand aging from a pretty non-traditional perspective. So I think there's a real opportunity for growth, and we're seeing that in the field of LGBT aging. What we're witnessing, though, and that was the second part of your question about returning to the closet, is that notwithstanding this movement in research and policy and throughout North America, that the experience of LGBT people and other members of their cohort, and certainly some in the medical environment, has not yet captured that sort of acceptance, that notion of equality. And so in order to receive services that they really need, many LGBT people sadly fear, or even more sadly, have to return to the closet to disguise who they really are, present themselves as a heterosexual in order to receive care in what is a pretty heteronormative environment. And by that I mean an environment sort of built upon heterosexual ideals. We see that sadly even more so, or more dramatically perhaps, amongst transgender persons. In some of our research, for example, here in Vancouver, we heard stories of transgender people who have not had all of the gender reassignment surgeries, recommending to others that they have the complete, as they called it, surgery, in order that when they present themselves in assisted living or for care, they would present themselves also as congruent. That is, that how they identified themselves as male or female matched their body composition at that point. The flip side of that, that's also amazingly dramatic, is that a colleague of mine doing research on transgender aging, Dr. Taryn Witten, has found examples or people reporting, transgender people reporting that they would detransition in order to go into assisted living. That is to say that they've gone through the transition such that the gender with which they identify matches the gender with which they present themselves to others. But fearing the way in which they would be treated in assisted living, have vowed that they would detransition, redo that surgery in order to receive the care that they should by rights receive without question. So the going back into the closet is really an area that merits much further examination and policy intervention, such that people can receive care as authentic persons in a holistic way, the way in which to which all people are entitled.